All right, we're going to get going here in just a minute or two. Hi, gorgeous Jenny, our wrench. Hello, John Poe. Nice to have you here. Scott Taylor, Golden Lee A. Nice to have you back. James Smith, thanks for joining us. And, we're going to load up here in just a couple of seconds. Remember, a great way to support this show is to hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and, of course, the Super Chat is always open, and we appreciate everything that you guys do for us there as well. Jose, what's happening? Nice to see you. The gorgeous and talented Nicole Sackett, you're looking lovely tonight. And Rachmaninoff, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining us. And, Sleaze and Cheese Movies, nice to have you back. Cat the Kit, you're looking lovely tonight. All right, let's get this thing going. Solder Warden, good to see you. Hi, Cherry Pepsi Mike. Here we go. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free for you by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. David Weatherly is a Renaissance man of the strange and supernatural. He also pulls off wearing a top hat just perfectly. David has traveled the world in pursuit of ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, magic, and so much more. From the specters of dusty castles to remote haunted islands, from ancient cities to modern mysteries, David has journeyed to the most unusual places on the globe to seek the unknown. His website is eerielights.com. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, brought to you by Paranoia Magazine. Mr. David Weatherly, it's been a couple of months since we had you on the show. How are you, my friend?
Dave Scott, I'm good. Always good to talk to you.
It is always good to talk to you as well. Are you, a couple of months ago when we had you on the show, you were out there at the East Coast getting ready to film some spookiness and run all over the place, and you still haven't made it home yet.
No, still traveling and researching and investigating and, having a good time, actually.
David, for you, and there's always new people listening in, so I always like to reintroduce our regulars, and I consider you a regular on here. For you, why did you decide to make this topic a career of chasing monsters and legends?
Well, purely out of just interest, essentially. It was one of the things that I became very fascinated by as a kid and sort of never let it go. And, I don't know whether it's the mystery of it or whether it's the weirdness of it. It's probably a combination of a lot of different things. But I grew up hearing ghost stories and things like that from my grandmother, and then learning other local legends and so forth. And, for me, it was just something that ended up being my passion. And as they say, what you're destined to do often finds you as much as you find it. And I just kind of fell into pursuing these things and never really looked back because it's what I've always enjoyed. And, really it's a true blessing if you can find something that you enjoy doing as a career, because most people, of course, get, shuffled into cubicles or fast food jobs or other careers that they're just miserable in. So if you're able to pursue your passion, it's a real gift.
No kidding. You're one of the only people on this planet that does what they love in chasing monsters. A lot of us want to do that full time, but I mean, how do you make a living off of this? I mean, it's got to be tough.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, I've done a lot of other things over the years on the side, but, you find ways to make it work. So, and over time, just between, it's just something that kind of, it happens for you, I believe. It's like Joseph Campbell said, you follow your bliss and other things fall into place.
For you, do you have a favorite monster or legend that you like to chase?
Usually whatever one I'm chasing at the moment, because they're all kind of fascinating. And as you know, I pursue a lot of different spectrums of this stuff, whether it's UFOs or cryptids or, haunted locations and so forth. People always ask me, is there one in particular that you like more than another? And really there's not. It all fascinates me, and truly even a broader spectrum than that, because when I got involved in this stuff in the 70s, you heard a lot about, for instance, psychic phenomena, and some of the ancient mysteries were really prominent during that time. So I've actually worked at studying those and investigating those things too over the years. But of course, currently, other things kind of take the forefront, and ghosts have been a big focus over the last several years because of television in people's consciousness, and the cryptids kind of have been too, because Bigfoot has become a very popular phenomena, popular pop culture topic, so to speak. Again, in large part because of television, but all of these things I think are just fascinating, and they're all sort of a part of the tapestry overall of Earth's mysteries. And, some of my early influences looked at these things in a very holistic manner and didn't necessarily say, well, they're all definitely connected, but at the same time did not discount that we have to look at high strangeness as a whole. And that's what I've always tried to do myself, hence the various areas of focus over time.
Now, for you, being a person who has had the opportunity to chase monsters all around the world, is there a difference between, say, chasing legends in North America comparatively to, say, Europe or elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of differences, actually. Some of it is, of course, cultural, because people in different countries and even different regions of the United States view these legends in different ways. So you have to take those things into account. You have to take into account the, whatever the local restrictions may or may not be. And for me, approaching this from an old school standpoint, my thing has always been getting out and going to the locations and interacting with people, sort of a journalistic approach, so to speak. And even though the internet is a useful tool for some things, I don't rely primarily on that. I never really have, because it wasn't there when I started doing this. So I'll utilize it, but for me, it's still about investigating the actual scenes, going to the location and talking to witnesses if possible, of course. But at least getting a feel for the area and the people and learning what is it that's unique about this place that may have contributed to the legend, be it a haunted location or, an area cryptid and so forth. And you definitely have to consider, if you're doing this internationally, of course, you've got basic things that are potential problems like a language barrier. And then you've also got, other things you have to be conscious of, well, is this an area and I can even go to? Can I visit this easily? Are there people I can talk to who I can, kind of get a translator? You've got all kinds of things. But when it comes down to it, at a core level, humans are fascinated by mysteries and strange things to some degree. whether they're completely, whether they're complete believers in the mystery or whether they're skeptical, there's something about it in some way that intrigues the average person. So I have found that there's always a common ground, a common thread that you can find to communicate with people. Sometimes you may have to do that through a translator. I've been many years ago to China and investigated some things there. And I don't speak Chinese, a handful of words here and there, but was fortunate to have someone who was a native Chinese speaker and also spoke English. So I found that, communicating with people and getting them to understand that I was being respectful and pursuing these legends, they would often open up. But one of the other big things too you have to consider is whatever the belief is that may influence that legend one way or the other. And what I mean by that is primarily the religious or spiritual belief, because particularly when you go to some places, if it's a haunting, for instance, there are certain parts of Asia where that's just seen as being very dangerous and risky. You shouldn't be messing with ghosts as far as they're concerned. So to actually go out and pursue these things is, they think you're kind of a little bit off your rocker to want to go and investigate and see these things. But at the same time, the modern world, I think a lot of people have that level of curiosity, and they will sit down and talk to you at the end of the day, and often share their stories, and that's the most amazing part of the experience a lot of the times.
David, has there ever been a story or a legend that you've looked into that really creeped you out? Because I don't take you for a guy who gets scared. I don't take you for a guy who gets rattled too often.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that kind of thing before on the show, and it really isn't in my nature. People are always asking me, doesn't it frighten you? And my answer to that is always, what concerns me is the the human dangers that exist in some of these places, and the reality of what humans are capable of doing to other humans. As far as a legend, well, I'll tell you one place that was really unsettling to me, and I can't remember if we've ever talked about this on the show or not, but quite a few years ago, I investigated a haunted location along with two other investigators that was the former home of a notorious serial killer. And the whole thing was just there were a lot of things that were unsettling about that experience. The location is Fox Hollow Farms. It's in Indiana. And this family lives in this house. This is the thing I had a hard time, all of us had a hard time wrapping our heads around. This guy's house was left relatively the way it was when he lived in it. And this family purchased a home and moved in, and they pretty much left it the way it was. And of course, they have all their personal belongings and everything in there. But, I'll give you an example of what occurred. So there is an indoor pool in this home on the lower level. And this was a bizarre series of killings because the guy was married with children, but he was stalking victims at gay bars. So he would send his family out of town, and he would go down and stalk these gay bars and bring his victims back to his home. And he would film his escapades with them. He had a hidden video camera that looked into the pool room and filmed, what was going on. Purportedly, he would also film the murders because he would often would use the hose that is used to clean the pool. Those automated hoses that
yes.
Float around. Okay, so he would use one of those, and this is the thing that really got all three of us during this investigation. And the other two guys were Dave Spinks and Mike Ricksecker. So the three of us were being given a tour of this home because the family had graciously agreed to let us investigate it. And this is a home they live in. And the gentleman is showing us around. He takes us down to the pool area, and in a very clinical manner, he's telling us, all this stuff that went on. And he takes us into this room just to the side of the pool. And he says, yeah, they think that he put the bodies in here until he disposed of them. And he casually points at the wall, and he says, yeah, that's the hose that he was using. And there's this, I don't think any of us knew what to say for a few beats, and we just kind of stood there. And I looked at this guy and I said, "Wait, that's the actual hose that he was using." And the guy's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So that's the murder weapon still just hanging on the wall?" And the guy just kind of shrugged about it,
Oh, that's stone cold
and
right there.
It is, and so my point in that is that to sort of get around to your question, this whole investigation was very creepy, just because of the collection of influences. The fact that this family is living, a family with kids, and they're living in this home and just going about their normal day-to-day business. And, here we are walking around, and several times we looked at each other and said, it's really unsettling to be walking around in this guy's, footsteps, essentially, the place where he lived, and he did all this creepy stuff. And, that's probably one of the most unsettling locations that I've ever been in. And, but again, it's because of the human factor. Now, it is a very active haunting. I can tell you that. We had a whole range of strange experiences that occurred in this place. And in fact, one of the strangest things was there's a separate apartment that's upstairs over the garage of this home. And there's a whole story about a victim who survived, got away from this guy, and part of this occurred in this apartment. There are a lot of stories that are associated with the apartment itself, because one of the manifestations, for instance, is that people who have rented the apartment will hear someone knocking on the door, and it's in the upstairs exterior door. So you have to walk up a flight of steps, and there's the door to go into this apartment. And people have heard knocking at this door, and they open the door, and there's no one there. And lots of other strange manifestations too. However, what had happened was we were able to get an interview with a gentleman who had lived in the apartment for a while. So at this point, he was with us, and the four of us were in this apartment, sitting in the main room, which is kind of a living room, and it's an open floor plan, so it's a living room kitchen area. And we're sitting having a discussion with this guy, and it starts raining. And it was pouring, driving rain coming down, against the windows and the door. And we were close to wrapping up our investigation at this point. Now, we had a lot of, high-end equipment in this place, so we're all kind of looking at each other, because the vehicles were parked, in the driveway, sort of a distance away from the house. And we're kind of looking at each other saying, man, the equipment's going to get soaked. I don't know how we're going to do this and get all this stuff out. So we kind of wrapped up this discussion with this guy, and we decided, well, we need to just try this and see, maybe we can move one of the vehicles or something. And we walk over and open the door, and it's dry as a bone outside.
Weird.
There's no sign of this storm and this rain that we were all listening to and commenting on.
Wow. That is just trippy. That is just trippy right there. David, we have about 4 minutes here before we have to go to break at the bottom of the hour. When something like that happens, like what goes through your mind and your body? You've been in this situation before. Majority of us haven't.
Well, even for someone who's been in the field for a long time, I mean, those kind of things are confounding, and of course the immediate response is you look for an explanation, you try to, in this case, I mean, we all went outside, we're looking at the ground, and of course one of my first thoughts was, okay, well, maybe sprinklers were, came on or something, even though that's not what it sounded. I mean, it was a storm that we were listening to. So, of course we checked for those types of things and lots of other stuff, but there was just nothing. There was no sign of any of this rain that we had heard. And all you can do at that point is, of course, just confirm it with the other people who were present, document whatever you can, and look for any evidence to explain it. And in that particular case, there was just nothing. There's no explanation for something like that.
Yeah, that's quite a phenomenon when something like that happens. Didn't that something weather-related also happen with Dave Spinks at his haunted house?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him.
Well, I know you've investigated that creepy house that he owns.
I don't know whether he had something similar to that or not. It was a very unusual thing that we experienced that night, I can tell you. And the thing is, it didn't take us completely by surprise, because there were storms in the area, and in fact we had done some investigation earlier that evening outside, and we were concerned because there was some lightning here and there that was occurring, because there's a whole wooded area around this house that has manifestations. People have seen apparitions and so forth. So, we were cautious of these things. So when it occurred, when we were sitting in the apartment and this started, we really didn't think that much about it. We didn't think that it was that unusual. But as I said, I mean, we all commented on the fact that the rain was so heavy. I mean, it was driving. That sound when the rain is driving against the windows. And it was just really pouring, really coming down. And to open that door and just see that everything's dry, it was just so bizarre.
Man, that just sounds weird, man. That just sounds totally weird, going through something like that. And it's unexplainable. And, I thought weird weather like that, we have every winter, Dave, when it's blue sky out, not a cloud in the sky, it'll be so cold that you'll have blue sky and it's snowing.
Oh, yeah.
That just trips me out. But that's nothing like what you went through with this, but it still trips me out, man. Still trips me out to this day. But, it's always good to hear, what kind of spooks you, because it really shows that somebody who does this on a full-time basis like you do actually can get a little weirded out and scared over what happened. It almost makes you sound normal, Dave.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole incident with the rain and the storm wasn't, that was just kind of fascinating, but again, the creepy element was the human side of this and the history of the home itself, so again, back to what people are capable of doing to other people, that is often the most unsettling aspect.
My friend, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to break at the bottom of the hour. David Weatherly is with us tonight, talking monsters all night long. We'll get into some sea monsters next with David, because apparently I thought he had a book, because I saw him having a book on this, but guess what? There was no book. So weird. Tripping out about that. But nonetheless, we will talk sea monsters next, and legends of the water with David Weatherly coming up on Spaced Out Radio. I'm still tripped out by that, Dave.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. But, no, it's good. It's good. Let's see here. So do you have a timetable when you're going to get home?
No.
Well, that's perfect then. That's perfect then. Will you make it home before we get to go down there for our Vegas party?
Well, when is that?
As soon as the border opens up, man. My gosh.
Jeez, man, that might not even be until next year at this point.
Oh, don't be talking about that. No.
They've given no indication about that at all.
I know. Trust me, I watch every day. Every day.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we got to get our Canada fixed, but, you can't go up there.
I know, right? It's terrible.
It's ridiculous is what it is.
Well, either way, right now is not the time to come up here because where I am in the forest where I need to take you, the snow is still on the ground.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
We went out last weekend trying to get to our area, and we finally got 2/3 of the way, and then we came across a truck that was stuck in the snow, so we had to help get him out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you guys still getting a lot of snow up there?
No, it's melting.
Okay.
But when you get heavy into the forest at a little bit of a higher elevation, it's still there, right? Like that area, give you an example, that area 3 weeks ago had about 3 feet of snow, 2 to 3 feet of snow still. And
Wow.
that's down to probably anywhere from like 8 to 12 inches now. Yeah. So, efforting, as they say, efforting.
Summer's coming.
I know. Saw the first mosquito earlier today.
Yeah, that's the one thing you don't want early.
No. Nope, do not want that. You know, that's what sucks about up here is you get 2 seasons. You get cold and you get mosquito. But we've already had a forest fire up here. A few of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Tell me about it. But, no, I look forward to getting up to our spot there where we had the communication with the Sasquatch, and I'm curious to see if my toys are still there, what's happened to them. I'm curious because when we get up there, there will still be snow there so we can check for footprints, and I'm going to build up that area a little bit more, see how it happens, what goes on. I'm going to bring up a jar of peanut butter.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yes. Did you bring your top?
Are you putting cameras out there?
We did last year. I'm going to go get 1 or 2 here in the next couple months. The problem that we have up here is there's a bunch of trail cam thieves up here.
Oh man, that's bad everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the problem that we have.
Yeah, it's really aggravating.
So, but I'm going to get
you can camouflage it and hope for the best, but
yeah. Well, we're going to try it, though, because we have to. We have to. So,
right.
But we'll see what happens. See what happens. I got to investigate that area more to see where the waterway is. Or it goes to my theory that they're there as guardians of the crash site.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's nothing up there, right?
No. Just animals.
Right. Is it Crown land or what is it?
Yeah, it's Crown land.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. Give me 2 seconds. I want to say a big thank you to Cat Chaser, Horror Realm, Vinster for the amazing super chats already to kick things off. We really do appreciate your support here on Spaced Out Radio. Here we go with the second half hour. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. In my opinion, David Weatherly is the greatest monster hunter in North America. He's somebody who comes on this show every couple of months if he's not busy chasing down monsters or filming his next paranormal investigation. His website, eerielights.com. You can find all of his books there or on Amazon. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave.
I think one of the most underrated topics that we talk about in the crypto world, the paranormal realm, would be sea monsters. Sea monsters have been seen everywhere from local lakes like Champ or Ogopogo to the Cadborosaurus that is said to roam between the northern tip of California right up to Alaska. The Great Lakes are supposed to have some wicked legends of sea monsters that have taken down ships, not including the Wicked Witch of November when she comes early. Thank you, Edmund Fitzgerald. But when you look at sea monsters, is this one of the underrated topics of the North American cryptid world?
Maybe. I mean, you can certainly find water monster legends, as you stated, all over the world. Both in the oceans and in freshwater. And doing this whole series on the various cryptids in different states in the United States, pretty much every book has had some water monster legends in it. The most recent one I just did was North Carolina, Monsters of the Tar Heel State. And, of course, there's some cool water monster legends in there. I think that to a certain degree, people, of course, they know Nessie. But beyond that, a lot of people just aren't familiar with many of these local cryptids in general. And to a certain degree, it's because they all sort of have their own unique flavor. And, if you look at Bigfoot, I mean, there are Bigfoot sightings in so many different places, and often a local nickname or something is given to the creature, but people, for the most part, still identify it as a Sasquatch. But the water creatures, they're all kind of somewhat unique, and you get the different ranges. Sometimes they're described as being giant fish, and sometimes they're described as being Nessie-like creatures, and then you get some other variations that are even stranger along the way. I think we've talked about the water babies, at one point, and you find these different things that occur. But truthfully, when you look at cryptids as a whole, the water really offers an opportunity for a lot of undiscovered species. I mean, scientists discover new fish all the time, new aquatic species in the ocean, because we still know so little about the deep ocean. And when you look at lakes, I mean, some of the larger lakes, we know a fair amount, but we don't necessarily know everything that's in there.
No, and I can see that and I can appreciate that. But do you think there's a logical explanation for a lot of these sightings? Like, give you an example. For instance, with Ogopogo, even though this is a legendary creature here in Okanagan Lake in British Columbia that's been seen for centuries by First Nations and even current residents of the area, I still tend to believe that we could be looking at a giant sturgeon. The West Coast sturgeon, the white sturgeon, can grow up to 20 feet, almost as big as a great white shark at times. It's been seen in the Fraser River, the Columbia River, which eventually separates Washington State and Oregon, starts in Okanagan Lake, and there is a large sturgeon breeding population around there. So to me, that sounds logical. As much as I'm very pro-woo, I still try to look for the logic in things. Do you think we're mishandling a lot of the logic when it comes to these sea monsters?
Not necessarily, because, I think that people who really get down to the actual investigation and search for these creatures, they do tend to consider a lot of different options. And, water monsters are a little bit tricky because I think very frequently when you look at cases collectively from any given body of water, you frequently find varying descriptions of the creature. And I think that what happens is that a unique blend of folklore and physical sightings occurs because, you get these legends that grow up around the creature and people know about the legends. So a lot of visitors and even locals, glance at that water expecting to see a certain type of creature. And sometimes they will mistake something that, is normal. The water can distort things and make things look very different. And unless you're a trained observer or very familiar with the wildlife that is in that body of water, you may not recognize something that is a normal known animal because it may appear to be something very different. I'll give you an example. There was a case I was looking at a couple of months ago, and it was a description that implied the person had seen a serpent-like creature in the water, and described, this long creature and several humps that were moving, and as the creature moved, the humps would submerge and then come back up. So they had the impression of this serpentine creature traveling across the top of the water. Well, it just so happened that another person had a sighting the same day, but he was a gentleman who lived near this lake and was familiar with the wildlife in the region, and he watched the same display, but he determined that it was a group of otters. So, otters, as they will move through the water, they'll surface and dive, and they'll move in a way that if there are a group of them, it could appear to be one large creature. So we get these types of things. And then you also get things like species that just haven't been discovered or verified in the body of water. The sturgeon is a great example of that because, there are a lot of different places where sturgeon probably do explain the creatures. A perfect example of that is Lake Iliamna in Alaska. All these very old legends of this water monster that lives in that lake. And when you look closely at a lot of the accounts, you start to hear some variations in the description of the thing. But even more importantly, when you talk to people who have lived in the area for a long time, and when you talk to the native people in the region, they will say, oh yeah, well there are sturgeon in that lake. It's just not necessarily commonly known because, sturgeon, they're very large creatures, but they also stay fairly deep in the water. So you have to consider all the different factors and understand also what the locals talk about and what they may already know about the body of water that you're studying. And, we have to consider all those things. And in modern times, we also have to look at the invasive species factor, because there are some creatures that get dumped in bodies of water that just don't belong there. I've seen tons of stories of piranha showing up in lakes that should not have piranhas. Lakes in the U.S. and so forth. And this is a situation where you've got someone who had an exotic pet and decided they didn't want it anymore, didn't want to keep caring for it. So what do? They go and dump it in the water somewhere. In the past, 10 years or so, we've had these invasive snakeheads show up in the United States, and that's a very strange looking fish. It's able to move on land, and it has a very serpent-like appearance. And if you haven't seen one of those and you're not familiar with it, then you would think it's some kind of very weird cryptid, possibly.
And those can get up to 3, 4 feet, 5 feet long.
Yes, they can go pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah, those are scary because they can live on land too. So if somebody sees something starting on land and all of a sudden slither itself into the water, they're not going to think, well, I didn't see a snake. I know what a snake looks like, but they're not going to be familiar with something like that.
That's right.
That's just weird. Weird. David, what about the idea that a lot of people believe that there are dinosaurs still lurking around? Whether it's in the Great Lakes, whether it's the Cadborosaurus, whether it's Loch Ness, whether it's Mokele Mbembe in Africa. What do you think?
Man, that's a tough one. That's Jurassic Park stuff right there. I think that there's a certain fascination with that, and people, kind of, to a certain degree, want that to be the case. But it's for the most part probably unlikely. Now, there are certainly things that are descended from dinosaurs, and there are things that were, have been around for a very long time on this planet. There are creatures that are very dinosaur-like in appearance. I mean, we were talking about the sturgeon. If you've ever really looked at one of those things, that is a very strange-looking fish. Basically has armor on its back. It's an unusual-looking creature.
Have you ever held one?
Yes.
Me too.
So, when you look at some of these creatures, it makes you think, well, yeah, maybe. But again, we kind of go back to the ocean. If there's anything like that is still surviving and has from that time, then that's where we're likely to find it, in the depths of the ocean.
Where did you hold a sturgeon?
Where or when?
Both.
I can't remember when it was. It's been quite a few years. It was in Alaska, actually.
Wow. Was it alive or dead?
Yeah, it was alive.
Yeah. I caught one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Where?
On the Fraser River, and it was my first time sturgeon fishing, and it was about 75 pounds. And the rule of the Fraser River is when you lose your sturgeon virginity, you have to give the sturgeon a kiss goodbye before you put it back in the water. So I have a picture of me kissing a sturgeon at 75 pounds, but we went out a couple times later, and this is how big these fish can get for a lot of people who don't know. We hooked onto this sturgeon, and there's 5 of us on the boat, and literally this sturgeon turned the boat around, and then we got everything straight, and it started taking us upriver. And it must have went underneath a log, because the Fraser River has a lot of logs on the bottom, David, but it must have went under a log and then came up. This fish was so strong swimming upstream and so big and powerful swimming upstream that it almost took the boat. We had to cut the line because it almost took the front of the boat underwater. We were within about 2 inches of the front of the boat going underwater. That's a big fish.
Oh yeah, I mean they're massive. They grow to massive proportions, and we're talking about dinosaurs. I mean there's a very dinosaur-like appearance about these fish, and in fact they're related to a fish that was around during the late Cretaceous period. So you're talking about, in a sense, a living dinosaur.
Mm-hmm. No, I fully agree with you. But if we focus on the lakes here, stay out of the ocean, stay out of the rivers, the lakes here, what do you think people are seeing? Because if we take a sea monster like Champ in Lake Champlain, which is a massive lake, this is something that has been seen for centuries, and people believe that there is some sort of Loch Ness type of monster in Lake Champlain, and it continues to be seen. There are people who are investigating there on that creature almost on a daily basis. And, I mean, in order for it to be some sort of monster like a dinosaur, wouldn't it have to have some sort of breeding population in order to keep going, which would mean that there would end up not just being one of them, but numerous numbers of these creatures?
Yeah, that's always the puzzle, isn't it, when we're talking about these lakes? But, you have to consider, too, again, if we go back to the sturgeon, how many of those, for instance, how many of those are actually seen on a regular basis in a place like Lake Iliamna? It's not a high number, but clearly there's a breeding population that has allowed these creatures to exist for a very long time, because the stories about them go back to early Native American tales. So I think you have to consider that is definitely a factor, but you also have to consider, all right, well, how much, what are the resources of this particular body of water? How large is it? What's the depth? The truth is that, even with all of our technology now, there's simply not an easy way to document or survey every bit of a body of water easily. Because, of course, things are in motion. So, even using things like sonar, you may catch something on sonar, but you know what? It may move out of your path and you may miss it. It may be on the the side that you've already scanned by the time you reach it. So it's just one of those things that is a constant puzzle, and you can't discount all the sightings on the other hand, because there are simply so many accounts from people who are good observers, from lifelong fishermen and outdoorsmen and people who do dedicate themselves to looking for these things. And there are things that just come up that are unexplainable. So, Champ, yeah, I mean, I've been out on Lake Champlain, and it's a beautiful body of water. It's very large, and the potential for undiscovered species there, I think, is very high.
What do you think is in Lake Champlain?
I'm not sure. I'm not willing to speculate on that at the moment. But other than saying that I do think that it's an undiscovered species. What exactly it is, I'm not sure. You look at these cases, and sometimes you have to analyze them in a different way and sort of break down the accounts and look at you have to partition them off to a degree and think, okay, well, we've got these accounts that sound like maybe it's a giant fish. We've got these accounts that sound more serpent-like. Well, if we're thinking in logical terms, maybe that's an undiscovered giant eel species or something along those lines. But then, in some cases, we look at creatures and there are just elements you can't easily explain in any way. And actually, we can talk about a perfect example of this. We can talk about Lake Norman in North Carolina. And I don't know where we are time-wise.
We got about 4 minutes here before the break.
Okay. So we can kind of hit this. So Lake Norman in North Carolina has a lake monster. It's been dubbed Normie by locals, and depictions, they often depicted in sort of a cartoonish manner. There's a kid's book that was written about it, but there's also a database online of people collecting accounts and sightings. And a lot of the accounts describe something that is very Loch Ness monster-like in appearance. But here's the kicker. Lake Norman is a man-made lake. It didn't even exist until the 1960s. So where did this thing come from? Now, that's where we get into all the different weird theories that have been thrown in over the years to explain what this may or may not be. There is evidence for very large fish in the lake. Catfish can grow quite sizable, and people have reported seeing giant catfish in the lake. But then there are other more creative theories, because the lake was financed by Duke Power, who built a nuclear power plant at the site. And some people think that nuclear waste from that power plant mutated something, possibly a snakehead. And, then you get the even wilder theories, that there's a whole theory that's kind of like a 50s sci-fi movie. It's talking about a hybrid that was genetically modified as part of a government experiment and pitched in the lake. You hear all these different things. People are just trying to explain this. Now, if we look in a more logical terms, then there's indications that, a lot of these sightings are probably giant catfish, or maybe something like an alligator gar, or, who knows, there could be a snakehead in there. But we're probably dealing with a known species that is in a place that it wouldn't necessarily normally be found. And again, this whole legend has grown up, so people go there often expecting to see something. And often, maybe it's something minor that they're seeing, but in their consciousness, it becomes more monstrous.
Could very well be, as we got about 90 seconds here before we go to break. That just amazes me that the lake was made in the 60s and it already has tales of sea monsters. Maybe the aliens dropped something off, Dave.
Who knows?
I want to ask you this, though, and this may seem a little puzzling, maybe not to you, but our audience. Do you think that a lot of these sightings are maybe people seeing or looking into a different timeline?
Well, that's a big question. If we go, I don't know if we even have time to address that before the break. But there are some people who believe that's exactly what's going on.
Well, if you want to go into detail when we come back from break on that, I think that would be perfect, because
sure,
it is a good topic. And I know in hour number 2, I'm already getting a bunch of people wanting to ask you questions tonight about sea monsters and other monsters that are out there. So I'm very excited to get them involved with you as well. So let's get you to hold on right there, because, well, heck, we only got like 6 seconds before we got to go to break here. So it doesn't make sense to ask you another question right now. David Weatherly comes on every couple of months here on Spaced Out Radio. In my opinion, he is the top investigator of all things paranormal, supernatural, cryptozoological, and ufological in North America, if not one of the best in the world. His website is eerielights.com. He has authored several books that you want to add to your collection. You can find them at Eerie Lights, and you can find them on Amazon. More with David Weatherly as we talk monsters all night long on Spaced Out Radio, coming up in hour 2 next. Okay, Davey, I'm just going to run the puppies out. I'll be right back, okay?
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Be right back, YouTube. I'm back, David.
Yeah, I'm on.
Did you hear we started as of yesterday, a new feature on our YouTube page with Ross Allison called The Angry Ghost Hunter?
Oh, I knew he was talking about bringing that back. Yeah.
Yeah, so we started it yesterday, and on our YouTube page, and I'm sure one of these days you'll get a call for it. We're doing it the final Wednesday of every month.
Gotcha. Yeah, he mentioned it to me a while back.
Yeah, it actually went really well. It went really well.
Did you just see the first one?
Yeah, we just did the first one yesterday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun. It's his birthday tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
I give him a call and harass him.
as you should. As you should. Why not?
All right. What are friends for?
Where exactly are you? Are you allowed to give out the location?
No, I'll tell you later.
Okay. Yeah, that works. That works. All right, we've got about 1 minute here before we're coming back. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, Mr. Catfish, thank you so much for that awesome super chat. Really do appreciate it. Thank you. And a big thank you to gorgeous Emily Bigelow, Horror Realm for the hat trick, Fapster, Cat Chaser for getting things started, Chat Smith and Vinster for hanging on out, doing this and supporting this show. We really do appreciate the love, everyone. We really do. Thank you so much. And David Weatherly is with us for another couple hours, or another hour and a half, actually. And we're going to get going here in about 10 seconds. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the woo, man. Because this is good stuff here right now.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning us on in. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are in this beautiful planet we call Earth. Thank you to everyone tuning in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Xerostomia. Xerostomia is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. From EerieLights.com, one of the best paranormal supernatural investigators in the world is with us as David Weatherly stops by. He tries to come in every couple of months if he's not busy to share some of his incredible research and stories from around the world of all sorts of monsters. We've been talking sea monsters all night long here on Spaced Out Radio so far. David, welcome back.
Thanks, man.
Always appreciate you. The Great Lakes. I want to ask you about those for a couple of seconds here while we get into the audiences. They're going to build up their questions now if they're in our chat rooms. And the Great Lakes have so many legends, from UFOs to sea monsters to bull sharks swimming around Lake Superior to the Wicked Witch of November. I mean, we have a lot of theories about the strangeness of the Great Lakes. How much have you taken the time to study about that?
Some. I've been up there. It's a beautiful region. And, of course, you've got a lot of mysteries concentrated there. The Great Lakes Triangle, which is infamous for a lot of disappearances. As you mentioned, the Wicked Witch of November, the storms that come in there are just incredible. And there are water monsters. The most famous easily is Bessie, who is in Lake Erie. And, that's a Loch Ness-like creature that a lot of people have purportedly seen and encountered. And this, sightings of this creature, they go back to, I think the first one was, sometime in the 1790s, I believe is when the first recorded sighting of this creature occurred. But of course, once again, we go to this region and we find that Native American lore from the area talks about something living in that lake for a very long time. So, here's something with a long ongoing history, and not sure exactly what to make of it. It's another one of those that a lot of people believe is possibly a sturgeon. But then you have to look at the flip side and listen to the accounts that describe something that is more Loch Ness-like, with a long serpentine neck. But again, it's it's one of those local legends that outside of the Great Lakes region, unless you really have studied cryptozoology and monsters, a lot of people just don't know about it. It's another water monster here in the States that people just aren't familiar with.
When it comes to the size of them, the size of the lakes are absolutely incredible. I mean, they're I believe, the biggest lakes on the planet, or a connection of lakes on the planet. And I mean, the way the storms roll in there, I mean, these lakes are almost like oceans.
It's like an inland ocean, essentially.
Yeah, totally. And I got to tell you, I mean, I've flown over them. I've never seen them outside of an airplane. And just the massive amount of water that is there. I mean, it's easy for things to hide. Easy. I mean, these are lakes, for people who don't understand, that can get waves that take down ships. Like 100-foot waves have been spotted in some of these lakes. And
that's right.
I mean, it's easy for something to hide in there. How often are the sightings of monsters happening in the Great Lakes?
They're periodic. You get, if you look at the sightings overall, of course, early on they're sporadic, and they always go through cycles where more people will seem to come across with their encounters in a concentrated period of time, and then they'll level off for a little while. But to a certain degree, we can kind of track that with the seasons, with the activity on the lake, and so forth. Bessie, is something that the sightings are fairly regular. There were a lot of them in the 1800s, and then they kind of leveled off for a little while. And then, there's been periodic flaps of sightings, of the creature. I'm trying to remember, there was one in the early 2000s. I haven't heard anything real recent up there, but again, that's an area that you have to kind of go to the place and dig into the local culture and, talk to people. And as you pointed out, I mean, we're talking about, this is not a small little lake. This is, it's like an inland ocean. We're talking about a very large body of water. So we've got a lot of different communities that live around any one of these given lakes. And it's difficult sometimes to run down encounters for something like that.
Do you think that some of those sightings could be, once again, sturgeon? We know that there has been sharks seen in there, especially bull sharks that seem to have an easy time living in fresh water as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is sometimes the case. As I said earlier, I think some of these accounts can be explained by known species that people just aren't very familiar with or aren't used to seeing. And even though it's been proven, for instance, that bull sharks will survive in these bodies of fresh water, but most people still don't know that. I've talked to people and told them some of the accounts of bull sharks being in fresh water, and they're kind of confounded by the idea, because logically people don't equate sharks with a lake. That's out in the ocean, where it's dangerous. But no, they can be found in normal bodies, in inland bodies of water. So we've got known species that do certainly explain some of these things. But once again, the anomalies creep in, and the accounts, all it takes is an account from someone who is a very good observer and got a very good look at the creature, and they give you something that you simply can't explain away, then you have a puzzle.
Do you think, out of all the areas of North America that we concentrate on, that the Great Lakes are probably some of the most under-researched?
I think that's probably the case, yeah. But, in part that's because you're talking about a pretty vast expanse of water, especially when you consider them collectively. And it takes a lot of time and dedication. I know people who have researched extensively on Lake Champlain, and that's a large body of water, but it's an isolated, it's a singular lake. So when you're talking about something like the Great Lakes and the collection of cultures and areas and everything you have to deal with to really delve into that, that's quite a task.
All right, let's get to some audience questions here, and they're going to be a little bit all over the place, as they normally are, but, we're going to ask them anyways. We're going to start off in the United Kingdom, where, good morning to you, Andrew, and he is asking, David, have you done any research on the alleged giant crocodiles that live in the sewers of New York?
Alligators, giant alligators. And those, that's considered an urban legend by a lot of people. And it's one of those things that goes pretty far back in the city's history. Now, you hear accounts of people flushing pet alligators down the toilet and them surviving and living in the sewers. And while I think that they have occasionally shown up, I don't think there's a thriving population or anything of them there. That being said, I have heard some very odd alligator stories from New York. I'll say that.
Do you buy the theory?
I think that a lot of things can live in that system below the city. People don't realize how many tunnels and, old, abandoned, there's so much beneath that city that people don't think about consciously. There's old sewer lines. There's also old subway tunnels and lots of other things. So whenever you deal with something like that, it creates an opportunity for whatever to move in and take up residence. So there's certainly that possibility.
Excellent. All right. Tristan, who's new to our chat room over the last week or so we're glad to have her here. She is asking, David, are you working on any new books presently?
Always. I just released Monsters of the Tar Heel State, and also Haunted Prisons came out, last month, I think. That's in the Haunted series that Ross Allison and I have been working on. And there will be the next book will be announced any day now, literally. I'm just kind of waiting for the cover to debut that. There's another one in the Cryptid State series coming. There's another, this is news that I haven't announced anywhere else, but there's another volume in the Woodknot series coming this year. And a few other books coming from me. So stay tuned. EerieLights.com is always the place to find announcements. And, I'll debut the covers and give release dates when they're available.
All right. That sounds perfect. Big Fat Creep is asking, David, have you ever looked for any monsters and stories where the monsters are protecting treasures?
There are a couple. There's, let me think. There's not necessarily a monster, but there's a curious legend in Utah of ghost protecting a treasure that is buried deep, possibly beneath a body of water. And there's a giant serpent legend from out west that purportedly protects an old treasure from somewhere in Central America. So these things do crop up occasionally. When you look into the world of treasure hunting, of course, everybody's familiar with Oak Island, but you can find other stories out there of treasures with curses and various protectors around them. So certainly there are stories out there.
It's funny because even with the crash site up here where we investigate, I honestly think the Sasquatch around there are protecting the area. I have a feeling about that. I don't know why, but after hearing so many times of stories of people hearing or having encounters of Sasquatch or Dogman at cemeteries, it just makes sense that they would guard, that they would almost be guardians of the crash site.
Hmm. Yeah, curious.
It is. Jeff is asking, what's your opinion right now of MUFON after everything they've gone through?
Oh, gosh. Who opened that can of worms?
Well, that would be Jeff.
Of course it is. I've talked about this openly before on the Trail of UFO series. I think that MUFON really reached a point where, initially it was doing some good work. I think over the years, periodically, it has done some very good work. But it has taken so much damage the last few years from a public relations standpoint that, it's hard for an organization like that to be effective now, after all that it's gone through. And when you look at the current state of it, I think it's just kind of struggling to survive. Now I'm not a MUFON insider or anything like that, so I don't, know that for a fact. But I think people have lost a lot of faith in the organization. And when something like that occurs, it makes it very hard for them to continue to be effective. I think that there's a space for a UFO organization that, maybe some new organization will come along and sort of step in and fill that void, because I think it exists now, whereas it didn't before. Does that make sense? MUFON has done a lot over the years, and you look at their overall database and the accounts they've collected and everything, and it's a good resource to a degree. But again, at the same time, I think they're just not. I don't think they can fill the role that they did for a long time because of what's happened to them in the last few years. Now, whether they'll stick around and eventually recover from that, who can say? I don't know. But right now, we just don't have that kind of an organization right now.
As I have stated to a good friend of mine, Tom Whitmore, who's on the board, they're an organization that really does need an enema that needs to just flush everything out, flush all the old school thinking out, flush the bad seeds out, because the gem of MUFON that we do not want to lose is the entire database that they have.
Yeah, the history there, that's what I was saying. It's phenomenal. The amount of accounts they've collected over the years. And, you can go back and look at some of those old cases. I mean, I've got years worth of MUFON journals, and you go back to the old journals and, you can read case accounts and a systemized way of investigating the scene and asking questions. Those are very valuable resources to have. But as with anything that gets too politicized, I think it reached a point where it's become kind of all about the organization and the people involved rather than about the focus of the organization. And that's where we lost something. So, yeah, it does need a major overhaul if it's going to survive.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think what they're waiting for, and it could be just my opinion, I think they're waiting to see what happens in the court case of Jan Harzan before they do anything.
Right.
And
that was kind of the final blow to the whole thing. It was. I mean, that was sort of the final nail in the coffin, because I know that after that, there were so many people that just refused to support the organization in any way after that happened. If that's not an indication that everything needs to be, rebooted, I don't know what is.
Well, I really hope they could get it together, because I do believe there are some great people on MUFON. MUFON members. I know MUFON members. And there's good people. There really is people who care on that board, but they do need to give themselves a shakeup. I mean, finding somebody to run a UFO business can't be that hard.
Oh, you'd probably be surprised.
True. We'll give it to you. Clean it up.
Yeah.
Right? Why not? We have about 4.5 minutes before we have to go to break at the bottom of the hour. David Weatherly is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. If you were to, I'm going to ask you this hypothetically, if you were to lead MUFON, what would you do?
Well, first of all, they'd never have somebody like me leading that organization. But oh my gosh, I'm not sure I'd even know where to start without, giving the current state of affairs a close examination. It's hard to even speculate on something like that because traditionally they've had so many irons in the fire that, I think part of the problem is that different people have controlled different sectors of that organization especially over the last several years, and that's led to some of the issues, I believe. I do know a lot of people, a lot of MUFON people, and there's just not much cohesiveness there anymore. You have people who are certainly dedicated and interested in studying the UFO phenomena, but you have other people who think it's a ticket for television opportunities, and other people who think it's just a meal ticket, and lots of other things. So it would, obviously, the first thing would be a major overhaul and examination of the organization like you're talking about.
Would you get different people involved on the board, or would you have to go through an evaluation process?
Oh, I think you'd have to evaluate that, but I think that you would have to, it definitely needs new blood, certainly.
I don't even know how you would start with that. I really don't. That's the hard part.
Yeah, well, they're sort of in a very defined mode of thinking, and I believe that the nature of the phenomena in our study of it is not static. So an organization studying it can't be either, or it's just not going to get anywhere. I mean, you can't apply standards that you used in the 70s now. Too much has changed.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Is MUFON still relevant considering what we see happening right now in the UFO world with people like Luis Elizondo and the fact that the media is all over this topic like a hot button right now, and that's media coverage that this people in this subject had always waited for? Well, and we'll continue this talk, by the way, in the next half hour after we come back from break in 90 seconds. But do you think that there is some real value in MUFON still, considering what we're seeing ufology turn into today?
I think that a UFO research organization is relevant, maybe more so now than it ever has been because of the developments that are going on. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's MUFON, but it means that an organization that is a central clearinghouse and a go-to source for information and perspective on the news that keeps coming out is greatly needed. And we really don't have that right now.
Yeah, it seems very individualized.
It is. And, you've got plenty of investigators around the country, around the world, individually who are looking into things. But there's not necessarily a central hub anymore. And, one of the big factors with that, I referred earlier to the public relations damage that the organization has had. And that affects the trust that people have in the organization. So, you go on and you've spotted a UFO. You're not someone who's interested in the phenomenon until you have this experience. And you go on and Google and say, all right, who do I report this to? Who do I talk to? You start Googling MUFON and you see all these news reports that, are not flattering at all. Are you inclined to contact this organization and tell them your story? No.
Very true. David, I'm going to get you to hold on there. We're going to continue with the UFO talk coming up because I know you're keeping an eye out on what's going on with the 180 days coming up here very, very soon. David Weatherly's website, eerielights.com. Check it on out for all of his books as well as Amazon. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. Fantastic answers there.
Cool.
Having fun yet, Dave?
Oh, it's all good.
I know you. I prefer when you're on the West Coast time. I feel guilty that you're tired.
No, I'm not.
That's cool. That's cool. We got 129 people watching right now.
Is that good or average or what?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty darn good.
That's good.
Just looking to see if I'm missing anybody in the chat room here. Don't have any more audience questions just yet. So we'll wait. They'll probably... Oh, there's one
Wow,
from
that's
Devin.
surprising.
Oh, they'll pop up. They slow down come commercial time. They'll
gotcha.
fire it up. They'll fire it up. Yeah, I got nothing fun. Oh, I had a You know, I've been keeping you in touch with the museum drama up here.
Yeah, well, not some. I haven't heard any updates on that in a while.
Okay, well, I got a little bit of an update. So I was talking to one of the board members because a couple weeks ago they allowed a film crew with there's a group of ladies here in the province who are, I guess, got a grant to film a paranormal television show. You know, at least a pilot or something. And Merle put it onto my attention. So I called up to the museum and I talked to one of the people on the executives who has supported the tour. I said, how come we're not allowed to do the tour and all the buildings are closed, yet you're allowing people to film in there? Right? So they were, anyways, it got to this whole conversation about, are you going to come back for the tour and all this once it opens up? I said, no. and they're like, and Tanya's her name, and Tanya was like, well, you know, what would do it? I said, well, we need an apology. You know, we were accused of some pretty bad stuff there, ruining buildings, breaking and entering. You know, I mean, which we never did. Oh yeah. And I said, you know, all we wanted to, I said, here's the problem. We bring in $5,000 a year for the museum. You need the money, and yet you guys are trying to bully us. So it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. She goes, well, why don't you put a proposal together? I said, proposal for what? I said, why should we have to put a proposal? We're your biggest donors. We're your biggest donors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right? I said, we're the only people who have brought in a tourism award to your facility.
Right.
Right? So apparently there's because it's a society, they have to have a public meeting, and that's supposed to be coming up here soon. I know it was supposed to happen this month. It hasn't happened yet because of it. But apparently, from what I heard, a few of the board members are a little antsy about me showing up and exposing them for the bullshit that they were causing.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Fun
That's
times.
called karma.
Fun times. Yeah.
So are you going to show up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, it has to be approved that I can speak. Has to be approved. Right. And if it's approved, I will speak politely, truthfully, and let them know these assholes that they have running the museum.
Wow.
Yeah. Hold on, my friend. We're coming back in 5 seconds here. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you've missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on with David Weatherly tonight from EerieLights.com. You can find all of his books on his website or go over to Amazon. In my opinion, David is probably the top investigator when it comes to everything with monsters, legends, and lore around the continent. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave.
I know you probably hate me saying that because you're a humble guy, but I mean that, by the way.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'll move on. We talked about MUFON here just before the break and about, changes that need to be made in order for them to have relevancy again. Devin is asking, couldn't MUFON reorganize themselves in a way that benefits its longevity, in your opinion?
Well, certainly it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of work, because of all the damage that's been done over the last several years. And, there's issues that go back in that organization quite a few years, back to the whole Bigelow connection, which, soured a lot of people on the organization. But even in recent years, as I stated, not to beat it into the ground, but the public relations damage that has been done to the organization has caused, I think, the public to lose trust in talking to them. And the example I used of someone who's a novice to the field, looking for a central place to report their encounter, it's just not going to appear to be a good option at the moment. So to fix that, you need to do some serious serious damage control and, a major reboot to the organization and a new approach, I think, which is, in any case, is called for because, as we were speaking about earlier, things have changed. Things have changed dramatically even in the last couple of years in terms of the study of this field. And with all the developments constantly happening, it's a job just to keep up with what's going on. And with the government playing such a role now in various levels of disclosure, there's a lot to examine and a lot to consider. So again, I think that a central organization that is trustworthy is certainly relevant, but we just don't have it right now as it stands.
All right, let's move on to another question. This one comes from Vinny, who is asking, David, who do you like to read or follow for your research?
Wow. I read a lot, actually. I've always been a big reader. And since the time I was a kid and got interested in this field, I pretty much read everything I could get a hold of. So I have a lot of respect for many of my contemporaries. Depending on the subject area, you can look at different people, but and maybe I'm biased because these are friends of mine, but Lyle Blackburn, has done some incredible work with cryptids. He's a Texas researcher. Nick Redfern, another good friend of mine who puts out books on a lot of UFO history and has really delved deep into some various things like the Men in Black and the contactee era. And those are fascinating books. But I also read a lot of other researchers and friends. Chad Lewis puts out great material. He just did an excellent book with Kevin Nelson on the Wendigo, a topic that no one had really studied closely. But, aside from that, I also I delve into a lot of old folklore and, depending on what I'm researching, different regional studies and accounts and so forth. So, I honestly just read as much as I can in the field.
All right, moving on. Julie has a question. She's asking, have you ever studied any of the Gulf of Mexico monsters? Are there any?
No, I haven't studied that a whole lot, honestly. There are a few sightings here and there of a water monster that's been spotted there. Almost any given area, quite honestly, over the years you can find some kind of sea serpent sighting if you go back far enough. But there's nothing off the top of my head that jumps out right off from that region. I've traveled pretty extensively through Central and South America and collected a lot of weird reports over the years. But there's not an account that is springing to mind at the moment about the Gulf of Mexico.
All right, let's move on here. 416 Bitcoin is asking, David, do you believe in the Thunderbird?
Well, it kind of depends on which one you're asking about. and that question sort of dovetails into something that we talked about earlier in the show and didn't readdress. And I'll get to that in a second. But first of all, the Thunderbird, there are primarily two different kinds of Thunderbirds that are reported. One is a giant bird that is far above the size of the largest known bird, which should be a California condor. So people report these massive birds with feathered wings and, the old stories, if you go back to native traditions again, or even early folklore, you'll find accounts of these things purportedly sweeping down and being able to pick up, a cow or a human being and so forth. Now, we're talking about that would have to be a massive bird. And the argument, of course, against their existence is how could something like that really exist and not be spotted more often? That being said, there are modern sightings. I did a chapter in both the Arizona book and the Alaska book on Thunderbird sightings because both of those states have a number of accounts, some of them modern, of people seeing these giant birds. But there's another kind of Thunderbird sighting, and that is a report that deals with a giant winged creature that people usually describe as something prehistoric or dinosaur-like. And the concept here is that it's some kind of survivor from the prehistoric age because they're describing creatures that have leathery wings, no feathers, giant heads, long tail, usually with a knob or a bulb on the end of the tail. And we know these kind of creatures existed in ancient times, but, certainly they shouldn't exist now, right? But, there are puzzling things that have cropped up over the years. The most famous account, of course, is the Tombstone Thunderbird. And that story is pretty fascinating because it kind of comes around to this whole idea of the Mandela effect to a degree. The Tombstone Thunderbird story is that there were a group of cowboys who shot down a giant winged creature in the desert outside of Tombstone. Usually it's talked about in the Wachua Mountains. So the story is that these cowboys shot this thing down. They drug the corpse to this barn where they pinned it up on the side, and a photograph was taken. Now, this is a whole area of study in a way in and of itself, because in the field of cryptozoology, there's a whole legend about the Thunderbird photograph. And there are people who remember seeing this photograph printed probably in one of the men's magazines from the 1970s. Usually people remember it being Saga or Argosy or one of those. And people have vivid memories of having seen this picture. I remember seeing the picture back in the 70s. Here's the kicker. No one has been able to locate the photograph, even though there's consistency in the descriptions of it, and there are a lot of significant people who recall seeing it. John Keel recalled seeing the Thunderbird photograph. Ivan Sanderson, the cryptozoologist, recalled seeing the photograph. Sanderson, in fact, reportedly had a copy of the photograph. And as if the story is not strange enough as it is, there's an account that Sanderson appeared on a Canadian television show, and he displayed the Thunderbird photograph during this show because they were talking about different cryptids and animal anomalies. The show is archived, and someone at one point went to the archives to locate the episode and view it so they could see the Thunderbird photograph. And it turned out that that particular episode, they know that Sanderson was on it, they know the date, the episode itself is missing from the archives. So we have all these strange things that have occurred with the Thunderbird photograph, and people have searched far and wide. They've searched through all the magazines. There are different accounts of where people think they saw it. Some people think it was in Fate magazine. Some people think it was in one of the men's magazines. And no one has ever been able to locate that photograph yet. And of course, when we get into the modern era of the internet, tons of people have photoshopped and fabricated this photograph. So if you go in and Google it, you're going to find a lot of, mock-ups and phony representations of what this photograph looked like. But it hasn't surfaced. And despite all of that, people remember seeing the Thunderbird photograph.
Awesome. And I know the photograph that you're talking about. If it's the one I'm thinking about, it's the giant Thunderbird, and there's like these old hunters standing on either side of it with their rifles, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pinned up on the side of the barn.
Yeah. I was always wondering if that was real or if that was Photoshopped.
Yeah, well, there's tons of Photoshop versions of it. But, again, people remember a lot of the Photoshop versions are based on people remembering seeing this photograph and describing it and talking about what it looked like. But once again, the photograph has never surfaced. And, to go back to the reference I made about something we were talking about earlier, you asked about this idea of windows through time. And there's a theory that some of these Thunderbird sightings of these prehistoric creatures are potentially people seeing briefly through a window essentially to another time.
Wow.
That, as strange as it sounds, would explain someone seeing a creature that, for all intents and purposes, couldn't really exist very easily in the modern era, yet people physically see these things and then they're just gone. And, so, okay, why did someone else see it? Where did it go? Why is it, why isn't it still here? And if we discount that it's a hoax or that the person is having some strange hallucination, how do you explain it? Sounds kind of out there to start talking about windows in time, but when you start looking at the advances in quantum science and what they're studying with this concept of passages into other dimensions, maybe that's exactly what's going on.
All right, Wendy has a question for you. And she is asking, David, have you ever looked into the Seneca gun boom phenomena around coastal North Carolina? If so, any ideas?
A little bit. These mysterious booms, there's not an explanation for it yet. There really is. And I was just talking to someone recently who's kind of doing a whole study of that and trying to chase down all of the accounts that they can find. And, they're completely intrigued by them. It's a fascinating phenomenon, but I honestly, I haven't delved into it deep enough on my own to say, here's what is potentially the explanation. A lot of people think it's a natural phenomena. I think there's something potentially much stranger going on. For all I know, we could be back to this quantum theory idea too, that where maybe people are not only seeing things from other levels of existence, but also hearing things.
Yeah, I mean, and these sonic booms have been heard everywhere, along with these screeching coming from the earth, almost sounding like the train brakes in areas where there's no railroads.
And from the sky, people are hearing these things from the sky, and there's other weird sounds too. People have heard trumpets, a lot of very strange things, and you start looking at all of these types of phenomena collectively, and you really kind of have to question exactly what's going on during our time, right now on a much larger scale than just, our state or country or planet even. There are some very significant things unfolding.
Right on. All right, Kira has a question. She's asking, what ocean monsters have been seen, and do sightings increase when there are earthquakes?
I've never seen data necessarily on them increasing around earthquakes. I don't know if anyone has correlated that data enough to know. It wouldn't surprise me because I do know that known species surface around the time period of earthquakes, for instance, things like sunfish and so forth. But in terms of which ones have been cited, I mean, really, if you're talking about just cryptids, there's a handful of creatures that were considered cryptids until they resurfaced that were ocean-based. To the pop and to my consciousness right away, of course, of the coelacanth, which was a prehistoric fish that was thought to be long extinct until one was caught. And then they later found a colony of the whole area where these fish were living in two different areas of the world. So they proved that this fish that everyone thought was extinct, no, it still lives. The other thing that was thought to be a cryptid was the giant squid. For the longest time, scientists said no, they only we know about squids, they get to this size, we know the species and so forth. But there were all these accounts of, seafaring lore, these giant squids that would occasionally be spotted by all the way back to the age of sail. And it wasn't until much, much later that people finally discovered, that scientists finally discovered, no, there is a species of giant squid. And in fact, they weren't even filmed in their habitats until the early 2000s. Japanese scientists went down and with a submersible and filmed the giant squid in its native space. So we're talking about fairly recent discoveries in those terms, and that should be a clear indication that we just don't know what else is down there. Everyone always leaps to the idea that, if there's a cryptid, it's going to be something, it's going to be a Meg down there, or something like that. But the truth is we just don't know. The depths of the ocean are so unexplored still that I think I think we're going to continue to see a lot of fascinating species become documented over the coming years.
I still think megalodon's out there, my friend. Somewhere, somehow.
You never know.
You know,
you never know.
I keep going back to that video from a great white shark that was caught up in the nets in Australia, and it had one single bite from spine to spine. And the researchers said that had to be at least a 35 to 40 foot great white in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I remember the photographs you're talking about. It's very creepy, and it just you have to kind of shake your head and wonder what's down there, right?
Oh, I don't want to find out because I'm a meal. I'm getting thinner. I am getting thinner, but I am still a meal.
Something like that, you're not even an appetizer.
I'm not taking the chance, Dave. Not taking the chance. All right. Bomber has a question as we got about 3.5 minutes here. She's asking, David, can you tell us about water babies? When I was little, allegedly I told my family I had water babies in the woods. I didn't know those were a thing. What are they?
So this is I don't know if you'll be pleased with hearing what this cryptid is, but this is a story out of Pyramid Lake in Nevada on the Paiute Reservation. This is in northern Nevada, and it's a very strange place in a sense. I've been to the lake, and it's kind of eerie to visit. It's sort of somewhat desolate in a way. It's a very picturesque area. It's called Pyramid Lake because there's a rock formation in the lake that rises up in the middle of the lake that is pyramid shaped. And if you Google it, you'll see lots of pictures. It's been used for different media, because of the scenery. But there's a Paiute legend that surrounds the lake about these creatures that live in the water. It's said that if you go down around the water, that you can hear this eerie sound that sounds like a baby crying, but it comes from the water. And it's supposed to be an ill omen to hear this noise. Now, I talked to a lot of people in the region. I spent some time around the lake, and there are birds, of course, that make strange sounds around the lake, but people familiar with the wildlife in the region say that the sound of these water babies is very distinctive, and that it's a very unnerving sound. And there are a couple of different versions of what these potentially may be. Some tales talk about children that died in the lake, and it's their spirits that remain there and sort of haunt the lake. But a stranger legend, and the one that you hear more often, is that a band of Paiutes had journeyed to the coast. They went to the west coast, essentially to California. And while they were there, one of the Paiute men met a woman who he fell in love with and brought her back to the Paiute land in Nevada as his wife. Now, the story is this woman that he met and fell for came out of the water. So she came out of the ocean. Now we're starting to hear something that sounds akin to a mermaid story. He brings this woman back, and the tribe essentially rejects her because she's not normal. She's not one of the people, and she's banished. And because of this, she purportedly cursed the lake itself to be, haunted by her people, by her children. And hence you get this weird water baby legend again. There's a few different stories that mix in here and there related to it, and there's different accounts of people having terribly bad luck.
David, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we do have to go to break at the top of the hour. We have David Weatherly for another 30 minutes. We'll take your questions on Spaced Out Radio, his website, eerielights.com. You can find all his books there. It's a great read from one of the best in the world on monsters. All right, my friend, I'll be right back.
Yep, me too.
6 minutes. All right, David, I'm back.
All right.
Big shout out to our good friend Bill Holzer, who's tuning on in. And Bill says to say a big hello to you, David.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Bill.
Yeah. Can't wait to get him back up here. Can't wait.
Good guy.
Very good guy. They've got us all segregated here in the province where we're not supposed to be traveling outside of our districts. Yeah. So, because the Vancouverites, they like to go all over the place and spread this crap. Damn Vancouverites. Lower Mainlanders. Shake my fist at them.
So is everybody completely locked down or what?
No, we're not completely locked down. They're trying to control where it is in the areas.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I can't wait for Bill to get back up here. I can't wait for Merle to get back up here, and that way we can start having some fun with some of these historic areas again.
So is everybody supposed to stay in their own province or what?
Well, we're all in BC, but like it's much like you have counties in the U.S. We have what we call districts. So you're supposed to stay in your district.
Right, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did. There's all kinds of different stuff because I know the Atlantic bubble over in the Northeast is still up, and it's just different. Yeah.
Then you get
everywhere.
Then you get Texas. They just don't give a care about anything. Love them. Love my Texans. All right, we're up in about 25 seconds. I want to say a big thank you to Anya, to Chris Reap, to Mr. Catfish, Gorgeous Emily, Horror Realm with the Hat Trick, Fabster, Chad Smith, Vinny, and Cat Chaser for the awesome super chats tonight. Thank you so much for supporting Spaced Out Radio that way. Thank you to all our new subscribers and all the veterans out there listening in. Here's hour number 3.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate you listening in, especially those listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam is set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Xerostomia. Xerostomia is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. For the final time tonight, we introduce probably the best investigator in North America or the world when it comes to monsters, legends, folklore, and everything paranormal in between. David Weatherly is here. He's an author who's sold thousands of books. You can find him at eerielights.com and all of his books on Amazon. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave.
I got a bunch of audience questions here for you, so we're going to continue with them. Sovereign is asking, can humans program monsters to guard treasure like supposedly the Spanish were able to do?
I've never talked to anyone who purported to do that, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one.
So if you had monsters, would you say, hey, go guard my gold. Make sure nobody steals it.
I think it would take a lot of elements because you would have to, be able to locate the creature and understand how to communicate with it and control it. And that's a lot.
For sure. All right, let's move on to another question here. This one comes from Race Fan. Have there been any sightings recently of Tahoe Tessie?
The last sighting I think I received was from 2019, and it was a fairly brief one. Just someone who was driving near the lake and spotted something. Again, a very Loch Ness-like creature swimming across the lake. After the book came out, I had people contacting me here and there with different accounts, but a lot of them were older, that they had seen the creature previously. But the most recent one that I remember was, I'd have to look at my files, but I want to say it was like from the spring of 2019. So it would be interesting to see if more surface over the past, from the past year with people being locked down and restricted so much. I know that a lot of people have still spent time outside, so maybe something else will show up.
All right, let's move on here. As Vinny is asking, David, have you ever seen or heard of a Thunderbird being escorted or followed by smaller birds?
There's an account from the late 1800s from Glacier Park in Montana, from a Native American woman and her husband who spotted 4 Thunderbirds. They said that 2 were adult and 2 were smaller. They appeared to be juveniles. And they believed that these Thunderbirds were living in the mountains there in Glacier National Park. That's the big one that pops in my mind right off. So, normally these sightings are typically of a solitary creature, and it's kind of fascinating to hear someone spotting one that, they're saying that there were multiple birds, essentially a family unit, that appeared to be living in the mountains there.
Well, that's weird.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty rugged region too. Glacier National Park is pretty big, and there's a lot of wild country in Montana. It's a very large state with a small population, so the potential for cryptids like that up there is fairly high. Even though there's not tons of accounts that come out of the state, there are some very compelling ones.
Cloudy with a Chance of UFOs, I love that name, by the way, is asking, David, have you heard of the Antarctica sea creatures that are meant to be apparently an underwater alien species?
Yeah, I've heard some talk about that. That's Antarctica questions are always tough because I haven't been there. And, it's an area that has led to lots of speculation and conspiracy theories. So the truth is we know so little about what's down there. We have a few scientific studies here and there, and we know some strange things have occurred there over the years. The Nazis, for instance, were fascinated with Antarctica. So, it's hard to say what's down there that's undiscovered. There are stories of alien bases and all kinds of things. What I'm really more fascinated by is the potential of what's under the ice down there, because there are different stories of vegetation and things that are on that continent that people just don't know about. So, maybe as technology and exploration continues to advance, we'll have some pretty interesting stories out of Antarctica.
All right. Tristan is asking, David, what experience made you change your perception of the world?
I'm not sure exactly what she's asked. I mean, I understand the question, but I'm not sure exactly what she's after. I will say that I think my perceptions started out fairly different because as a child, I didn't really shut down, so to speak, meaning that I stayed open to the potentials of a lot of alternative things. I was fascinated by all of this paranormal and supernatural subject matter when I was a kid. The idea of aliens, the idea of magic, which led me to studying a lot of traditional beliefs and systems from around the world. So my perception was kind of altered right from the get-go, I believe. And because of the combination of studying and investigating the unknown and also studying ancient traditions from different cultures, it gave me a different approach right from the beginning, and I've never really altered that, because when you go to an ancient culture, most of the time, whether it's the ancient Celts or a Native American culture or an Asian culture, a lot of these people traditionally accepted these things as a part of their worldview. The idea of various types of creatures, the idea of other types of life, other levels of existence. Those were all part of the makeup of these people. And because I studied and pursued those things, it's always been a part of my perception too. And I think that's something that makes me unique, somewhat unique at least, in my investigation of these things.
Vinny has kind of a similar question, and I know you touched on it a little bit in the first half hour, but he is asking, David, did you have an experience that made you decide to investigate monsters?
I don't know if there was one singular one that made me decide it. It was more of a collective influence, over time, because I, as I stated earlier, I heard ghost stories from my grandmother when I was a kid, and I just started being fascinated by things in the early 70s that I had heard about. Of course, back then the big things were the Loch Ness Monster, of course, in Scotland. The Yeti, in the Himalayas. The Bermuda Triangle was a big deal. So, you had these mysteries, and of course UFO sightings and other sporadic things. You had these mysteries that cropped up here and there, and it's, as I've talked about before with you, Dave, it's not something that was part of pop culture back then. So you couldn't flick on the television and see, channel upon channel and tons of shows about these topics. So you really had to kind of dig. And for me, I think to a certain degree, it was kind of a way to rebel, to be different. I was just fascinated by this stuff and decided to pursue it, and then ended up, meeting a neighbor who introduced me to Fate magazine back in the 70s. And that was just kind of mind-boggling in a way, because here's this monthly magazine with people all over the world studying this stuff and writing about it and documenting it. So all of those things, I think, collectively led me to pursuing this stuff, as well as, of course, early experiences in my life that just spurred me on all the more.
You mentioned the Bermuda Triangle. There's something we don't hear a lot about anymore. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because, a lot of people tend to discount it and say, well, it's understandable through natural occurrences and accidents and various things that can explain why the various vessels have gone missing there. But it is a weird phenomenon, when it comes to it. Now, it's funny because periodically theories will still pop up. There are people who still research it. And the last big one, of course, from quite a few years ago now was the rogue wave theory. This is what caused the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon. It's these rogue waves. And, it's always both interesting to listen to these theories and kind of fascinating. And at the same time, if you're really looking at it objectively, you have to chuckle a little bit, because you think, okay, well, here's somebody again who's trying to fit a whole range of various phenomena into one singular box. And I don't think you can do that. So this rogue wave idea, it's kind of fascinating, because it probably does explain some of the ships that were lost, but I'm sorry, there's not a rogue wave that went up and took down a plane. That was on a search mission or just flying over the area. So you have to back up from the theory and say, okay, this could be a component, but it certainly doesn't explain everything that's gone on here. At the very least, it's such a strange combination, or a concentration, of lost ships and planes, that is very difficult to explain. And you have random things show up, like the guy several years ago now who flew through and experienced a strange time phenomena, and there have been other reports similar to that. So there's something that we still understand about that region that, at the very least, affects instrumentation and possibly the human senses too.
All right, let's move on because I know there's more questions. Tristan is asking, what great or interesting similarities do you find in the cultures of different sides of the world when it comes to these creatures?
We talking about monsters in general?
Yeah, monsters, paranormal, UFOs from around the world. What's the interesting talk going on?
Well, there are several. We talked a little bit earlier about other dimensions of existence, and one of the things I've always found fascinating is that cultures all over the world have this concept of another race having lived here, other people having lived here on the planet at the same time the humans did. Now, they take different forms, often depending on the culture and the regional variations. But and you can kind of isolate it. You can look at, for instance, one of our favorite topics, Dave, little people.
Yes.
So, you hear these stories of little people, and when you start talking about that, a lot of those who aren't completely familiar, they instantly think about, of course, gnomes, or leprechauns. Those are the two that usually come to mind the easiest. And if you have to pin people down and say, well, where are they? Where do they, where does that come from? People will usually say Europe. They'll say Ireland for leprechauns, and they'll say, well, gnomes are somewhere in Europe. But here's the thing: you can go all over the world and find stories of little people. Many people don't understand or realize that Native American tribes all over North America have legends of little people that once lived here at the same time the humans did. And you can find these accounts in Asia. You can find them in the Pacific Islands. You find them all over the place. And there's a consistency in the stories in that in many of these places, the little people ended up leaving. Now, the variation is often in the way they left. Now, sometimes it's through a tunnel or a passageway or a shimmering door, or they went down inside the earth. But we're talking about essentially these other people exiting through some kind of portal. Now, what does that start sounding like if we correlate that with quantum science? Well, we're talking about other dimensions of existence. And they knew how to utilize those or access them, or maybe how to come and go. And it's an understanding or a technology that we simply don't have right now. We've lost, or we just don't have it. So, I think that's pretty fascinating if you isolate a singular thing like that and consider, okay, well, here's this legend that it's almost universal. And that's only one example. Of course, there are a lot more. There are cultures all over the world that have this concept of star people, people who came down from above. There's other things that have been accepted by science to a certain degree. For instance, the universal flood was for a long time considered a myth, but you can find evidence of that in cultures all over the world. So, I think I've always thought it's important to look at whatever area you're studying, look at the regional perceptions and the folklore and the traditions of the people who've been in that area longer than anybody else, and listen to what they say, and set aside your bias that, they're talking about mythology or fairy tales or whatever it is, and kind of strip away those terms from your consciousness and listen to the story and try to understand it in modern terms, because it often leads to a greater level of understanding of what is potentially occurring in the region. The same can be applied to, monsters. I mean, we talked earlier about water monsters. So many of these places, the accounts are ancient. These traditions of the native people in the region talk about these creatures living there long, long before, any modern civilization was there. So, hey, where there's smoke, there's fire.
All right. I think that's right, and I think that's a great answer. All right. Big Fat Creep. I love that name, too. Some of the names our people come up with are fantastic. As we only got about 4 minutes left, David. Big Fat Creep is asking, what urban legend or monster do you like the most and believe in, David?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one, because I'm fascinated by them all. Really, these cryptids, like I said earlier, it's usually whichever one I'm pursuing at the time is what I find the most fascinating at the time, I believe. And the ones that get me often are the oddities, the ones that are not necessarily a singular sighting, but that are just so strange that they sort of culminate in a set of circumstances that just don't quite make sense. The water baby legend is a good example of that, because on one level we can kind of dismiss that as folklore and say, well, okay, it's just this story. But then when you start looking at some of the other facts associated with the case, it becomes a bit stranger, because once again, you've got an ancient tradition that goes back, far back in the oral history of the native people of the region. And then you've got modern accounts. The legend is that the people living around that lake were cursed because of rejecting this woman who came up out of the ocean. So, there's legends that these water baby creatures live in that lake, and that they'll come out and they'll try to lure people into the water. And when you look at that and you look at modern accounts and circumstances, you find that there are a lot of strange deaths that have occurred at Pyramid Lake. There are people who have reported seeing things that you just can't quite explain away very easily. There are people who have been fishermen for years and have seen strange things. There are boats that have capsized and they can't really find an explanation, what caused this boat to capsize. It's as if something hit it from underneath and flipped it over. So those are the kind of things that I think are very interesting to delve into, because you sort of go down the rabbit hole when you look at all the various connections that dovetail into making up the legend as a whole, and it often leaves you with more questions than you have answers. But hey, that's what makes it so interesting to a degree.
All right, we've got about a minute left with you, Dave. I'm going to have to say sorry to our audience that we can't get more questions in, but hey, sometimes you run out of time. Do us a favor, David. Tell us, everybody, where they can find your books, how they can get more information to you, and all about what you're up to these days.
Well, the books are on Amazon.com, of course, and those are available in Canada as well as the U.S. The website is eerielights.com. There is a page on there that will hot link to all the books that are currently available. The homepage will have news for upcoming releases, and two most recent books, Monsters of the Tar Heel State, focused on North Carolina, and Haunted Prisons, exactly what it sounds like it's about. And there are, at least a couple of books that are about to be announced. So keep an eye on that page in the coming week, and you'll see the debut of a cover for a couple of new projects. There's also a film project that's about to be announced. That's probably within the next week or so. Eerie Lights also has an Instagram page. You follow that and you'll get updates there also. There's a contact page on Eerie Lights. Send me your stories. I always want to hear them.
All right, buddy. Thank you so much. David Weatherly, everybody. He is the best in the business. in my opinion. Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire. We have the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. We continue with Spaced Out Radio after this. Another fantastic show, my friend.
Hey, man, thanks. Always my pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I forgot to tell you, a buddy of mine, Mike, up here, he was out hunting a couple of years ago, and he went to this gravel pit that's up the road towards the crash site, almost at the halfway point. And here he is. He gets out of his vehicle. He's kind of walking around, and all around him, he starts hearing my voice saying, "Mike, come here, help me. Mike, come here, help me." Now, I'm at work while this is going on. And there's nobody in the forest. And he said it wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from all directions. So I talked to one of our First Nations guys here about it. And I asked him, because I know the Wendigo and the Skinwalker have been known to do that. But we apparently do not have those in this area. And he said that it could be the little people of the forest that were trying to lure him in.
Wow.
Yeah. So now we have another place to actually go camping, Dave, to see if that happens.
That's great. Huh. Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That mimicking thing is pretty fascinating. I mean, I've heard that before too, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, buddy. I will let you go. You can go get some sleep.
Yeah, good talking to you, man.
We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, buddy.
All right, bye. Love David Weatherly, everyone. Love David Weatherly. Hi, Terrible Times. How are you? Boots here. Boots are where? I don't see any boots around here. Pardon me. I'm going to have to blow my nose. Pardon me. I'm going to turn my microphone off so you don't hear my nose goblins. There we go. Now I feel better. Take my Vicks, too. If it's all around, you don't go. That's where you don't go into the forest, Tristan. That's where bad shit happens. Yeah, David Weatherly's incredible. Who wearing their undies at the computer tonight? It's always me, Katie. No, I got track pants on. See, with this, when we're using the old system tonight, because the new system I haven't got figured out with Skype yet. And when I get that figured out, then we'll be able to just use the new system. Yeah. So I can't do that tonight. But because I like the fact of being able to click on your names and putting your questions and your quotes up. I really like that. And it also allows us to broadcast out to Twitch and Twitter at the same time as well. Vin, the only place you've seen a thong is on a Sears catalog. That's it. Mm-hmm. All right, we've got about 90 seconds here. Maybe less. We've rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune us on in. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. If you missed most of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Speaking of the news, let's do it. Let's get to it. The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the grotesque. Food scraps and biodegradable utensils are common fodder for compost, but in the state of Colorado, human remains could soon be transformed into soil too. Colorado State Legislature has passed a bill that would allow composting of human remains in lieu of traditional processes like burial or cremation. State Representative Brianna Titone, a Democrat who sponsored the bill, said she had gone to funerals and seeing burial or cremation as the two options, thought, "I don't know if I want either of those things." When she learned about human composting, she said, "It really excites me." If Governor Jared Polis signs the bill into law, which legislators say is likely, Colorado would become the second state to legalize human composting. Washington State did so in 2019. Legislators in Oregon, California, and New York have proposed human composting legislation as well. A representative for Mr. Polis did not respond for media requests on this topic. The legislation was introduced last year, but it ended up dying during the COVID session, no pun intended, said Representative Matt Soper, a Republican who was a co-sponsor of the bill. In an attempt to lighten the mood while discussing the bill at the state capitol, Ms. Titone and Mr. Soper told their colleagues they had resurrected the bill from last year's legislative session. "Look alive," Ms. Titan said, introducing the bill. "We know you dug it before." The process of human composting takes about 30 days, Mr. Soper said. Under the new law, it would be illegal to sell the soil produced from human compost or to use it to grow food for human consumption. Mr. Soper said that he had spoken with Colorado Department of Natural Resources, which said it would be legal to place the soil on public lands. You know what? If I'm going to do this, I want to be in rose bushes or trees or something that's good. I just don't want to be spread around like asphalt or soil. No way, man. I'm worth something. My body is worth something. Damn it, don't make it dirt. Make it into a beautiful, healthy tree or something like that. I don't know. That story freaks me out. I don't even know why I read it. Scares the daylights out of me. NASA's Mars helicopter has hit a bit of a snag. Aim high and fly again. A Thursday tweet by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reads, "The Mars helicopter's ambitious fourth flight didn't get off the ground, but the team is assessing the data and will try to aim to get it up in the air soon. In reality, it remains unclear what the helicopter's current state is, and it would be a shame if it had already broken down after just 3 flights on Mars." The tiny 4-pound rotorcraft was supposed to push the envelope with his 4th and 5th flight attempts. The plan was for it to fly to an altitude of 16 feet, then fly south for 276 feet, passing over rocks and small impact craters and taking some pictures along the way before returning to its original landing location. The news comes after Ingenuity broke its own flight speed record during its 3rd flight earlier this month, flying 64 feet across the Martian surface and reaching a top speed of 6.6 feet per second. To achieve the distance necessary for this scouting flight, we're going to break out our own Mars record set during Flight 3, Johnny Lamb said, the backup pilot for Ingenuity Mars helicopter JPL. We're upping the airborne time to from 80 seconds to 117, increasing our max airspeed from 2 meters per second to 3.5, and more than doubling our total range. We have been kicking around several options regarding what a Flight 5 could look like, Ingenuity Chief Engineer Bob Ballaram said in a statement, but ask me about what they entail after the successful Flight 4, we'll see. The team remains committed to building our flight experience one step at a time. You know what happened here? I'll tell you what happened. Some alien got curious and said, I want to take a look at this. I want to know what's going on. Finally, after years of throwing rocks, I actually have a toy to play with. Probably a child alien who disobeyed its parents and came up to the surface, saw the toy, and was like, oh, I got to play with that. That's guaranteed what happened. Guaranteed. If you're not buying that, well, I'm sorry for you. The New York City Police Department's contract with the robot dog that spawned countless Black Mirror memes has been mercifully cut short. Yeah, the New York PD Deputy Commissioner confirmed that in response to the pretty universal backlash stirred up by the so-called DigiDog, along with a hefty subpoena from city council officials, the department terminated its $94,000 contract with the robot's creators, Boston Dynamics. John Miller, the department's deputy commissioner for intelligence and counterterrorism, said that while the contract was supposed to run through mid-August, a full year after the pup was first procured, instead the department quietly cut its ties on April 22nd, apparently having only been used in the field about 6 times before being shipped back to Boston Dynamics. People had figured out the catchphrases and the language to somehow make this evil, Miller said, noting that the tech had become a target in arguments about race, surveillance, and general dystopian horror. In the past, Boston Dynamics executives have pointed out that most of its robot dogs aren't actually used by police. For the most part, they're used for pretty mundane, if not slightly dangerous tasks, like carrying out safety inspections for grid workers or scanning building layouts for companies looking to do construction. A spokesperson for the company says that the bots weren't designed to be used as weapons, inflict harm, or intimidate people or animals. Here's an interesting one. At first glance, the stonefish sitting on a kayaker's paddle near Townville, close to Queensland, Australia, looks like a mound of crap. Literally. Look closely, however. Make out the fins, mouth, eyes, the mud-encrusted member of the Cyathea genus pictured below. Which, I'm looking at this photo. It looks disgusting. Anyways, this happens to be one of the most venomous fish out there. It's called a stonefish. Yeah, how would you feel if you looked like a pile of dog poo? That's what this fish looks like. And they get their name from their camouflaged appearance, which usually resembles a stone. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we guessed it, a stone. No, it looks like doggy do. Then the fish usually sits on the bottom. If disturbed, it will actually use 13 needle-sharp dorsal spines to release a potent neurotoxin into someone's foot if accidentally stepped upon. See, another reason not to go into the water of Australia. Crocodiles, great white sharks, bull sharks, tiger sharks, and now poo fish that actually have poisonous tips on their spine. Yeah, not going there. Absolutely horrible. I'm sure Australia is a beautiful place, but everything kills you on land. Everything kills you in the water. It's just not worth it. Not worth it. Although, I will say koala bears are pretty damn cute. A huge statue at the hand of Constantine the Great in Rome has been reunited with its missing finger after more than 500 years. The 38-centimeter long bronze index finger, found in the Louvre in Paris in 2018, was remounted on the statue at Rome's Capitoline Museum. Sorry about that. The finger was perfectly restored to its rightful place using a non-invasive, reversible, and invisible system. The director of the museum's Claudio Parisi has said the Louvre has mistakenly categorized the finger as a toe until an eagle-eyed researcher, Aurelia Azima, established that it was the long-lost digit from the hand of the Roman emperor's 12-meter-high or 39-foot statue, fragments of which had been kept at the Capitoline Museum. The ancient relic was among a collection acquired by the Louvre from the Italian banker and art collector Giampietro Campana in 1863. Campana, who died in 1880, brought together one of the 19th century's greatest collections of Roman and Greek antiquities. In 1913, the Paris Museum had categorized the finger as a Roman toe, and it was not until 2018 that it was recategorized. Azima, a doctoral student, had made the discovery during her research into ancient welding techniques for large bronze statues. She realized that the fractured finger would fit as a statue around 12 meters tall, leading to the theory that it may be Constantine's missing index finger. Le Louvre's archaeologist Nicolas Millard used a 3D technique to make a replica of the finger, which was taken to Rome in June 2018 by Louvre curators François Gauthier and Sophie Deschamps. The copy turned out to be an exact fit. Among the fragments of the statue on display at Capitoline Museums are a massive head, a left forearm, and a sphere. The hand is also missing its palm, which held the sphere, and part of its middle finger. The index finger is believed to have come off when the sphere was separated from the hand and placed on top of a column standing at the first mile of the Appian Way, the earliest and most important road of the Roman Empire, back in 1584. A Florida woman scratching off a $500,000 lottery prize caused her to become so excited that she burnt the dinner she was cooking. 29-year-old Christina Ritchie told the Florida lottery officials that she was cooking dinner when she decided to itch that scratch of the 20X crossword lottery ticket which she had purchased. And lo and behold, she was excited to reveal the $500,000 prize that she forgot about her food. When I realized I had won, she said, I ran to tell my fiancé. We were both so excited that I completely forgot about the food and ended up burning our dinner. However, it was worth it, though. The winner said she already knows what she'll do with the money. I always said if I ever won the lottery, I would buy a house, and now I can. Holy cow. Florida woman actually using common sense to a lottery winning. Isn't that nice to hear? Now, you may think you're pretty smart, but you're not 12-year-old smart. A 12-year-old North Carolina boy who took a few extra classes in his spare time during the COVID-19 pandemic is now preparing to graduate high school and college in the same week. Yes, 12-year-old Mike Wimmer of Salisbury will graduate Rowan Cabarrus Community College with an associate's degree May 21st and will graduate Concord Academy High School just 7 days later on May 28th. Wimmer has a 4.0 GPA at the college and a 5.45 GPA in high school, earning him the role of class valedictorian. I went through all of the grades in school at a faster pace, Wimmer said. I'm like a sponge. I take in knowledge very fast. Wimmer said he had some extra time during COVID pandemic shutdowns and discovered that if he added just a couple of extra classes, he could graduate from both schools at the same time. He ended up completing the equivalent of 2 years of high school and 2 years of community college classes in a single year. The 12-year-old said his lifelong interest in technology and robots led him to create his own startup, Reflect Social, which aims to simplify how smart home technology works. My entrepreneurial goal is to build technology that enables people to live better lives. The boy said he is now considering his next options because at 12 years old, you have to consider these things, which could include continuing with school, accepting various job offers, or pursuing a fellowship to grow his startup. Wimmer said that amid his academic and entrepreneurial pursuits, he still makes time for activities like basketball and building Lego sets. A lot of people think I've given up my childhood or somehow lost it, Wimmer said, and I say to them that I'm having the time of my life. Good for this kid. Good for this kid. Now, wouldn't you be proud if you were his parent? I mean, I'm proud of my kids. I'm very proud of my kids, but gee whiz, being a genius like that? Oh, wow. Authorities in New Mexico worked together with a power company to rescue a wild bobcat that was seen stranded at the top of a utility pole. Donna Ana County said residents reported a bobcat was stranded atop the electric pole in the Topaz Road area, and officials determined the animal needed help to safely get back to the ground. The county worked together with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish and the El Paso Electric Company to devise a rescue strategy. The county recognized that this situation was an ongoing public safety concern. The bobcat didn't seem that interested in leaving its perch, though, or was too scared to do so, said County Manager Fernando Macias. The county deployed a Facilities and Parks Department bucket truck, and an EPE officials had the power to the lines running to the pole temporarily shut off during the rescue. Officials said 42 customers were without power for less than an hour during the operation. The operation went well, especially considering how quickly it came together, said Sergeant Chris Ortega of the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. I am humbled by the number of people that were willing to assist our department in our efforts to safely remove this animal. The bobcat was safely removed from the pole and released from Lake Valley area near Hillsboro and into the Gila National, or is that Gila, I believe, National Forest. Good for the cat surviving that. That could have ended up much worse. And finally tonight, I don't know what's on Shirky Poo's mind when she gives me stories like this, but here we go. A prankster ordered a 7-foot steel penis to be left outside his mate's house. Why not? Fortunately, yeah, it's all on video, and of course it's going to go viral. The impressive custom-made phallus was created by Latham Steel Doors, a steel fabricator in Oldsbury, West Midlands, with the company asked to deliver the product too. After a tough year, the team decided to fulfill the order for a laugh. Photos show workers standing on the platform designing the metal hammer, which was made complete with 3D balls. Yes, the surprise birthday gift was engraved with a happy birthday message and came with some very specific requests. The prankster, who has not been named, asked for it to be self-standing, and it also had to be thick enough to make it difficult to get rid of. What a jerk of a friend. This is something that I got 3 guys in my YouTube chat room. Vinny, Ryan, Fapster would totally be in on this. I bet you they sent it. Anyways, it was also specified that the penis had to be welded together to make it impossible to take apart. Additionally, it was requested that it be galvanized so that the impressive object could be kept outside in case someone wanted to turn it into a garden feature. It would make a nice water fountain, come to think of it. Yes, for the icing on the cake or the blank and balls. Yeah, you get the picture. They asked for it to be wrapped up with enough polystyrene balls so that it would be a pain to clean up after it was open, and for it to be delivered as secretly as possible and left outside the house. The pranksters planned everything for maximum embarrassment. Yeah, CCTV footage, which can be found online, literally shows the recipient's house, shows the penis being delivered to their house, wrapped in a black plastic and put out in the front driveway. The recipient then runs out, tries to move it as quickly as possible, but he can't fit it between the 2 cars on the driveway. At one point, it looks as though he's checking the neighboring houses to see Whether anyone's noticed, unfortunately it seems the birthday boy wasn't best pleased with his meticulously planned present because the very next day it was posted on Facebook Marketplace for sale for £123. It's a lot of penis right there. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. What do we got here? Oh, let's find it here. What's the chances of sea monsters existing? Start with Eric Mitchell, former guest. I think the odds are pretty high considering we don't explore the oceans much. Evan, depends on what you define as a monster. There are some scary-ass squid out there. Magnus, I think since we've proven the giant squid is real, which is basically the Kraken, there's a good chance. Tim, Megalodon is real, along with mermaids. Discovery Channel had shows saying so. Gary Voorhees, he's been on the ocean with the U.S. Navy. It is a better chance than lake monsters. Andrew, the term in the Aramaic for the creature that swallowed the prophet Jonah was not big fish, but sea monster, I do believe, unless it was only a sea creature. I am trying to remember. Cheryl, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do at the bottom of the ocean. Joe, everything that lives in the ocean except for maybe 3 or 4 kinds of fish are monsters. If you don't believe me, just picture one of them in your living room. You probably just screamed. They're all monsters. Brian, who has about 1,400 podcasts, 100% chance. We have not explored 1/32 of our waterways. Alfred believes there's an excellent chance. Melinda says, sure, like Nessie seems pretty legit. Michael Morris, don't ruin my childhood. I know Sigmund is real. Cat the Kit, the ocean will excite, bedazzle, and eat you all at the same time. Scott, 100%. We know crap all about what lives in the oceans. Constance, what is your definition of a sea monster? Danny, I would say a huge chance. We haven't even explored much of the ocean. Karen, very good. The ocean is big and unexplored. Jeff says 8.9021%. Thank you for that. Michael Huntington, former guest, more likely than any other land creature or paranormal phenomena. Scarlett gets the final word tonight. Godzilla. Thank you to everybody playing in the Thought of the Dave. We'll do it all again tomorrow on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you to Captain Shirk for an awesome newscast tonight on the SOR Newswire. And, of course, to the legendary David Weatherly, talking legends all night long. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight on YouTube, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, the Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and of course, Derek and the Starkettes tweeting away at hashtag SpacedOutRadio. This show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, say it with me, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night, but soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.